host, Yvonne Wolf. Today, our special guest is Scott Winterroth. He's author and digital marketer who wrote and published The Digital Acquisition Cycle. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Yvonne. It's an honor to be here today.
So, Scott, what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, great question. So the digital acquisition cycle is a culmination of about 10 years of making mistakes online. And I say mistakes in a positive way. I believe that we all sort of need to play and need to be creative and make mistakes along the way. So in 2008, I started a country music blog. It was called Country Music Chicago, and it was a really fun opportunity for me to kind of like use my skills in writing and online publishing and building a blog. But I realized over the years that what I was doing is I was creating a community, and I had sort of frontline experience from sort of doing digital marketing. So I decided to take all that information I learned over about 10 years from helping clients to doing a bunch of different sort of online endeavors, online entrepreneurial projects, and take all that information and sort of dial it into one book. And that's how I created the digital acquisition cycle.
Country music? Chicago? Did I get that right?
Yeah, you got it. You got it. Believe it or not, Chicago is one of the biggest markets for country music. So it was quite the site for a while. So yeah.
Actually, I met somebody who was a country music writer, and he started this rock house. Maybe you know that world, huh? Yes.
Yeah, for
Oh,
sure.
so
It's a cool place. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little more about like building a audience and viewership. I mean, you say we learn from our mistake along the way. You didn't know you were building a audience, or did you?
Well, I think that was my intent. I had a little bit of a sort of grassroots approach to it. I kind of just started, I created a blog and I just started publishing content, and I built a Facebook page. Now, mind you, this was 2008, so things are way different today than what they were back then. But you could just create a page and people would like it back then. Today, it's much more of an advertising medium.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the truth is, as these platforms have evolved and as platforms like social media and blogging have become more of an advertising medium where you're expected to pay for action, I realized that some of the mistakes that I made at the time is that I didn't necessarily have the right product in place in order to capture the right audience. I had fans, I had friends, I met a ton of cool people. One thing I loved about the country music site is that I got to meet a ton of artists. Like, it was a great way to meet artists, but I needed a way to create a sustainable income from doing it. And that's why I lost attention, is because I wasn't really able to make money doing what my passion was. So it was more of a hobby versus a business. And that's actually how I kind of look at websites and blogs today, is that you need to make it more of a business. And ultimately, this book is a little bit of my business plan for that.
You actually have a little part you address that, so let's get to that later. This is your first book. So at a Toastmaster meeting where we met, you told a story about how you were prodded or prompted to write this book. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, sure. So one evening, a friend, Chris, and mine, and Chris was a much older gentleman. He probably could be my father's age, and ultimately, we were standing on the steps to his house one evening, and I was telling Chris, we were sharing business ideas. He was an entrepreneur like myself. We were sharing business ideas, and I was like, "Hey, I'm writing a book." And he turned to me and said, "Writing a book, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Can you write a book, Scott?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think I can write a book." And obviously, I'm a writer. I enjoy writing. Of course, that's subjective. Some people like your work, some people don't. But at the end of the day, I consider myself a writer. But of course, it made me think of everything I've ever wrote over the years. And then he turns to me and says, "Scott, some people can write, but they really don't know how to write a book." And that really put me on a long-term journey of trying to figure out how to publish a book. And if I should publish a book, like, am I worthy enough of writing a book? Ultimately, I decided that, yes, I am worthy enough to write a book. And ultimately, that it took several years, but it generated this book and many more. I have a couple more books in the works, but ultimately, actually, I'll be honest with you, this book didn't start as this book. It started as a different book. Yeah, it's the digital acquisition. Sorry, I'm going to show it. Thank you for holding up, Yvonne.
It's all right.
This book actually started as a different book called The Blog You Want and the Time You Have. And my story with Chris is the beginning of that book, but that book is not yet published. But at the end of the day, I had to create this book in order to finish the other book, because This is the actual marketing strategy. So if I want to talk about how to blog, this is like, if you're going to blog, this is the strategy you want to do that. That's why I ended up creating this. But that's the beauty of creative work. You start doing one thing, and then as long as you get to a final product, it doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get there.
Well, it sounds like a very familiar story to many of our authors who thought they were going to just write one book and it became a trilogy, or if they thought they were just interested in one subject, they really found out by the research they were doing, they were ready to write two books simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So this digital acquisition cycle is an entry book for exploring the digital marketing business. Now, who is this book for? Was your intended audience? You were thinking of before a blogger, right?
Well, Yvonne, it's
Originally.
interesting. I think every author likes to think that anyone could get value from their book, right? But as a marketer, I know that it's good to have an audience to focus it to. Honestly, this book is really like, if I was writing a letter to my 20-something-year-old self starting that country music blog, it would be this book. You know, like, this is what I really was like writing to myself when I was 20 years old, what you should have done to make money. But so I did say it's actually the digital acquisition cycle for content creators, because at the end of the day, if you're looking to build a content, an entrepreneurial content endeavor, whether it be a blog or a YouTube channel, a podcast, this ultimately is a sound strategy for creating content, for making it sustainable so you can make some money doing it, and
Mm-hmm.
coming up with ultimately a product plan that you're going to actually build a product around your content creation efforts. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that being said, a lot of marketing today, or a lot of especially organic marketing, is creating content, right? So not it's yes, it is ideal for someone who is a creator or an author, maybe even. But if you are going to be someone who has a business, or you have a business that's not necessarily a blog, this could still apply to you, because at the end of the day, a lot of marketing today is content type stuff. So if you want to do content, I think this is a primer for anyone getting into that space.
Well, content is a very broad yeah, term, right? It could be for profit, nonprofit. I guess it could be for personal interests, hobbies. All these things could be content, right?
Absolutely. And the truth is, depending on what you're doing, it changes a little bit. And that's one thing that was a big enlightenment to me, is that once I had a product, whether that, and I use the term product loosely in the book, product could be a service, it could
Yes,
be a
this.
physical, it could be a physical product, like something I literally have to ship to you. It could be like an informational product, like a course or a book or something like that. But once you have a product, then the idea of creating content around that product makes so much more sense, because then now you're creating blog posts, you're creating videos, you're creating social media content
Mm-hmm.
with the intent to promote that book or to promote that product.
So
You
there's
know,
an end in mind. There's right. There's a call to action to that end.
yeah. So at least if you're going to create content, you have some way to hopefully make some money doing it, right? Whereas a
Yes.
lot of us, myself included, starting that country music blog, although I had you could say the blog was the product. I wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
selling anything. You know, it's kind of like a
Mm-hmm.
newspaper. I mean, newspapers and magazines are still struggling with this today. They're not really selling something that people are willing to pay for, when you can get you can get information free anywhere else, right? So having some type of something that you're selling, whether it be a book, a course, a service, is something that I highly recommend when identifying what a solid content strategy is today.
So that leads us to our question of, you wrote a whole section on how to make a blog into a business.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and this comes from one experience, or I think you have far more experiences to get to this lesson for us.
Yeah. Well, as I say, just like writing books, once you start one blog, you want to start 10, you know? So, so then actually I got hired by someone to help them start a blog. It was a wine blog, a wine blog that was surrounding just the Midwest wine industry. So it was more of like a trade publication. And I had a lot of fun helping that client set that up. And we did it for several years. Again, not to my knowledge, but he didn't have quite the right product, therefore it didn't quite last as long as I think it should have. But ultimately, so I've been building blogs for myself, for clients, and I create content today. I just love it, and it's something that I do. I try to do it more efficiently today than ever, but ultimately, yes, I've had lots of years of starting and stopping and starting over again. And that's how I learned. That's how I keep my saw sharp. And I really just keep learning it from the front lines. Like that's what I do. Yeah.
Oh, I think there's a whole lot to what you do. you so you make digital marketing world sound easier to understand. And
Mm-hmm.
in this book, you debunk some of the digital marketing myths, such as marketing is for big businesses only. So is it true that anyone can do social media?
I think anyone can do social media, right? But when you start to market, when you turn it into social media marketing, that's where things get a little different. And that goes back to having a product. A product usually requires some type of offer. The price, price marketing your product with the right price, the right gotcha, the right catch kind of thing. And that's when things get a little crazy. Anyone can do that. It just might take some time. And if you have someone who can help you do that, I think it's even better. But one thing that I really realized is that this whole book is based around the concept of an infinite loop, which you can
Mm-hmm.
kind of see that infinite loop on the homepage.
Yes, yes, I do see that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and ultimately it's also on the back cover too. You'll see more of
yes,
the
the
actual
infinity
yeah the actual this
sign.
is the actual strategy
Mm-hmm.
outlined in the book. But ultimately, there's two types of people that respond to your marketing: the people that you don't know and the people that are already in your database. So
Mm-hmm.
we do things like publicity and advertising. I mean, you could buy a billboard on the highway if you want to build visibility for your business. A lot of us today, because it's more cost effective, use social media advertising like Facebook, Instagram, that kind of stuff to build visibility for your business. Then where it crosses, that's your website. That's where people come to actually convert into your database, or they call you to make an appointment, or they become a follower on whatever platform you want them to become a follower on. Maybe that's LinkedIn. But the truth is, you have to have some type of conversion. And then once you have them, you have to keep them up to date. And Yvonne, I have to say, you do a great job of doing this. You have to keep them up to date with like newsletters and events and that kind of stuff. And Yvonne, I always love your newsletters and always attend your online events. So not to flatter too much, but yes, you always do a great job with this.
Hey,
So
I can live on flattery for 2 months. I think that was Mark Twain said that.
yeah.
Now, how have you pivoted your book marketing tour, or do you have a book marketing tour that is a virtual platform during these COVID changes?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? In the early parts of 2020, I started to really get out there and do workshops and that kind of stuff and promote the book. I had the opportunity to speak with another great group called the Independent Writers of Chicago and a couple of groups, the Midwest Writers Association, and then that was like February 2020, and then
Hmm.
the pandemic hit. But one thing that I love is I love doing online events. I love doing virtual events. I've always actually enjoyed doing them, but now like, actually what's been helpful to me is the pandemic has brought a lot more people online and more Zoom
Yes,
friendly, more Zoom comfortable. So to me
definitely. Yes,
it's been a bonus because I can do book tours, if you will, or webinars every week, and everyone's online. They were looking for something to do. So things have changed. I've had the opportunity to speak to some great groups. I've had the opportunity to work on my speaking skills through Toastmasters with you, Yvonne. Thank you. And it's just, to me, I love it. I'll do it in person or online, but online's great because I've been able to meet people all around the world, from Australia to the UK to right in my own backyard here in Chicago and Glenview as well. And
definitely.
and it's been a great opportunity. And just got to keep plugging away. You got to pivot. You got to pivot when you
Yeah.
can.
And I think it's so true that before, this is kind of the bonus that came out of the COVID. Before Zoom existed, I went on a couple of those events, but it just didn't seem like it was very popular.
Hmm.
But now look at the first option would be Zoom, and then here we are.
Yeah.
Now, how did you design the cover? Were you the artist? I mean, you had in mind this infinity sign, right?
Yeah, so that the infinity thing kind of evolved. It first started off as two Venn diagrams. A Venn diagram has the
Yes.
overlapping circles, and I'm like, no, it's more of an infinite loop. So I kind of evolved it into more of an infinite loop. And then I actually like sketched it out on a piece of paper, like what I wanted, and I kind of wanted like the steampunk sort of feel, like where it's got like like it's an actual machine. And then I
Yes.
found a very talented artist online who actually did like the vector drawing of it, because that's way beyond my skill. So that person did this part, and then I did the actual like the title and the the other stuff. But yeah,
I see.
that's one thing I actually benefit from doing my blog all these years, is that I've sort of learned programs like Adobe Photoshop and stuff like that. So I'm able to do it myself. I don't have to. I don't always do it myself, but I can. I don't consider myself an artist, but I can do it enough where I feel like I can do it. Can put it out in the world, and that's helpful. So another thing, you just got to get out there. You got to do it. You got to make sure that you learn and be willing to make mistakes and not worry about that, because every mistake you make is a positive interaction.
Well, Scott, you sound like a Renaissance man. Drawing and country music, I can just see
Yeah.
you with everything just from your office there too.
Yeah.
Now, who do you plan to inspire with your book? I think you have a huge variety of audiences.
Well, it's interesting because I think that there's lots of people who I hope would find it's really the person who's maybe starting a TikTok channel or starting a YouTube channel or starting a blog. They're still blogging today, and they're thinking, "Gosh, I'm starting a blog, or I'm publishing a book, and now that I've got this work of art, or now that I start creating, how am I going to actually make some money doing this?" And that's what I hope this person will find valuable, sort of in my journey, and ultimately apply this to today. Apply this to the strategies and tactics that we use today.
But when I read your book, I just feel like every few pages I'm saying, aha, okay, because it is nice and succinct. I
Uh-huh.
like how it's really sound like you too. Now, well, Scott, you're a busy man. I've seen your programs and I saw that you had another book out that you were very generous to just give out in a digital format. It's 50 plugin tips for WordPress, right?
Yeah, that's an ebook that I created, and a lot of people always ask me. I've done WordPress training for many years. That was again a byproduct of my blogging. I learned how to use WordPress, and I help other people learn how to use WordPress themselves. And everyone's always asking me, well, Scott, what plugins should I use for my site? So I'm like, well, you know what? Here's 50 plugins that you should use. And it's an ebook, and you can download it from my website. And it's just something I use to help promote my business, but also help other people learn how to use some great WordPress plugins.
When you look at all those choices, you say, Scott, please help me. You do it for me, right?
It's a little overwhelming, but that's okay. Yeah. Not by design, but yeah, right.
No, it's because it's for a variety of uses and also variety of learners. Not everyone, 50 would seem that many if you're already into WordPress for a couple of years.
Correct.
So do you have a special place you write? I know your office, that nook, is probably where you do everything.
Well, this
Your
is my writing.
microphone, right? Yeah.
This is my definitely since the pandemic. This is my writing desk, if you will. But honestly, I like to write in coffee shops. I just like
Yes.
you put some headphones in, you have a cup of caffeine, that gets the juices flowing, the energy from the room. It really helps me write. But I haven't been able to do that since obviously pre-pandemic, really. But things are coming around. I've been popping in coffee shops a little bit more and more here and there, but that's where I prefer to write. Otherwise, just a nice quiet place and getting in the groove and just really kind of trying to write a little bit of time. Another thing, I love to write in the morning when I can. That's actually how I wrote this book, because I got up early, got up at 6 before I had to go into the office, and wrote this book, and just try to cover. I try to write for 30 minutes each day, and if I don't quite make 30 minutes, sometimes there's a struggle to do 30 minutes. If I
Yes.
write, I write longer.
Sometimes, yeah.
That's great too. But I try to at least write for 30 minutes a day. You
Yeah, 30 minutes some days feel like an hour, and then 30 minutes some days feels like it's just not enough.
know.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I understand what you're saying. But do you feel like it's been easier for you during this COVID quarantine time, that with you save all that time from driving, that you are spending more time writing? Or is it a 30-minute that you actually put a timer and make yourself stop or go, that kind of routine?
I do think that working from home has been an opportunity to be able to write more, because I don't have a commute right now. Although there are benefits to the commute too, because it helps me clear my mind. It helps me listen to
Yes.
podcasts and audiobooks and stuff like that. So I do miss that on its own front, but it is nice to recoup the 2 hours a day that you save from commuting. And I'm not heavily writing a book right this second. So when I say I write for 30 minutes a day, I should say I write for 30 minutes a day when I'm heavily trying to write a book kind of thing. Right now, I'm really focusing on trying to grow my audience myself, because when you write a book and you don't have a huge audience, it's kind of disappointing because not a lot of people necessarily buy it. But at the end of the day, it takes a couple books to get there. So my recommendation would be to write one book so you have something, and then you can work on getting an audience. And then your third and fourth book would be, you hopefully have a little bit more of an audience to launch it to.
That's so important.
Yeah.
And I think it's with the amount of research I've heard many authors do, it is almost easier, right, to write 3 at a time than just making 1 at a time. I think that's very encouraging. Also, Scott, you have just such a variety of experiences, from blogging and helping clients. I would think that you have lots of books under your belt already.
I've got one pretty much written. I just need to finish it up. Yeah.
So so I think a lot of people use blogs as a launch pad for writing a book.
Yes. That's actually my next strategy, is to really more blog my book, like to blog it and then publish it. I would definitely want to do that my next go around for sure.
I mean, it's not that revolutionary idea if you think about people like Charles Dickens. I mean, he wrote serials just to keep the newspaper running, right?
Mm-hmm.
His job of feeding his family. So I think we're just modern bloggers, or in the tradition of serial writers like Charles Dickens. So what would you recommend to our viewers who are writers?
Keep at it, be consistent, do what you can to publish and leverage your creativity. Understand that writing is not just sitting in front of the computer. It's about being inspired. Doing, one of the people that I love is Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way. You've got to go out and have like creative play dates, and you've got to go out and be inspired, and then take that and then try to be a funnel yourself and a sponge, and then create content and publish it out into the world, and just do it consistently, and it will come.
Oh, that's really nice, Scott, because I totally identify with that. I mean, there's daytime Toastmaster clubs where I feel like, oh, I can't believe I have to go to this meeting. I have to stop everything. And then when I go there, I hear someone else's story. I feel, well, that's what I can blog about next. So it's definitely couldn't underestimate more the value of meeting other people, hearing other stories.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Scott, you sound like a jack of all trades, but the rest of us, we only know our one little sliver of expertise. So how do we develop that? How do we become an expert?
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing that I like to say, it's good to know a lot about different things, especially when it comes to digital marketing, because the more you know, the more you'll be able to sort of be creative and understand how it works and be able to tell someone what to do. But one thing that I'm trying to work on now is scaling my content team. So finding the right people who can draw, who can edit, who can do video, so I don't have to do it. So I can focus on the number one thing that makes sense for me. And that's actually the stuff that only I can do. Like the stuff that comes out of my mouth, like only I can do that. But I don't have to edit my podcast, so I don't have to do some of the graphic design work anymore. So I'm trying to really get into a mindset of outsourcing so I can do that. And having a product where you are making some money is a way to, so you can then, you need that so you can hire people to help outsource and scale your team.
Yes, and you need at least a proofreader, right?
An editor or proofreader is definitely a good idea when possible. I know I always have typos, but I don't let that stuff bother me. So
just release it anyway.
Yeah, whatever. Hey, when people tell me it's wrong, I've said thank you, a free proofreader. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Scott, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yvonne, it's been my pleasure. I thank you so much for doing this with me.
I always enjoy our conversations. And thank you for watching. Join us next time on Off the Shelf.